What if everything you thought you knew about Cinderella was a lie? The fairy godmother, the glass slipper, the happily ever after. What if these weren't magical gifts, but carefully constructed deceptions designed to hide something far more disturbing? Tonight, we're peeling back centuries of sanitisation to reveal the forgotten history of Cinderella, a tale so brutal, so psychologically complex, that Disney would never dare show you its true face. This isn't the Cinderella explanation you grew up with. This is the version that was buried because it contained truths about power, transformation, and survival that civilized society cannot bear to acknowledge. Before glass slippers, there was blood. Before fairy godmothers, there were spirit contracts sealed with ancestral sacrifice. And before happily ever after, there was a price that extended far beyond a single lifetime. The Cinderella original story wasn't about magic, it was about survival. And the price, your soul. Are you ready to discover what Cinderella's original story was really about? Because once you see behind this mask, there's no going back. The fairy tale was never yours. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. The Cinderella story was never meant for children. The original Cinderella myth emerges from the primordial darkness of prehistoric Europe, an oral tradition where stories weren't entertainment. They were cultural preservation systems carrying essential information about survival, social dynamics, and the supernatural forces that governed human destiny. Cinderella facts Disney doesn't want you to know. She wasn't saved by magic. She wasn't innocent, and she definitely wasn't waiting for a prince. In the oldest versions, Cinderella was a survivor, a girl who did whatever it took to escape her fate, even if it meant unspeakable things. Cinderella wasn't a passive victim waiting for rescue. She was an active participant in her own violent transformation. Academic research into Indo-European folklore patterns reveals narrative structures that predate written literature by millennia, stories so disturbing that every culture that touched them felt compelled to soften their edges. See, every culture has their own Cinderella, but here's the weird part. They all share the same dark elements, the same violence, the same ritual transformation folklore. Why? Because they're not just stories, they're instruction manuals. Manuals for what, you may ask? For climbing the social ladder when the system wants to keep you down. For transformation when the world says you don't deserve it. For survival when everything is stacked against you. But transformation always comes with a price. What do you think that price was? Drop your theories in the comments. Some of you might be closer to the truth than you realize. A feast of flesh and bone. Let me paint you a picture of prehistoric Europe. No Disney castles, no happy endings, just survival. In the earliest Cinderella myth explained, transformation didn't come from waving a wand. It came from a ritual so disturbing, so brutal, that later generations buried it completely. The ritual was eating her mother's flesh. I'm not joking. In the oldest Celtic versions, young women gained power by consuming their mother's heart while it was still warm. The heart provided courage and strength. The brain gives you wisdom, the hands gave you skill, the tongue gave you the ability to charm anyone, perfect eloquence necessary for navigating aristocratic society. But here's the really messed up part. The community helped. They held the girl down if she tried to run. They prepared the meal according to ancient recipes. This wasn't random violence, this was a spiritual contract. A way to absorb maternal power and transcend your birth status. The stepmother figure in these prehistoric variants represented not personal cruelty, but cosmic necessity. She served as a ritualistic executioner whose abuse was not pathological sadism, but sacred duty, the essential violence that prepared the heroine for transformation into something capable of transcending ordinary human limitations. Her job was to test if you were ready for the ritual. If you could survive her abuse, you might survive eating your way to a new identity. Think about that the next time you hear about wicked stepmothers. They are not wicked. They are preparing you for something much worse. The ball was a ritual sacrifice. You might think the royal ball was romantic. You are wrong. In ancient versions, the ball was a gathering of otherworldly entities, test. A trial by fire where supernatural forces judge your worth, each evaluating the candidate's suitability for interdimensional marriage. And if you failed, you don't just go home disappointed, you disappeared. The fairy godmother wasn't granting wishes. She was enforcing contracts, ancient deals that your bloodline made generations ago. The dress, the coach, the shoes, all of it came with strings attached. Strings that wrapped around your neck if you didn't deliver. See, the glass slipper wasn't just about finding the right foot. It was about finding the right soul. In Germanic versions, the shoe would burn anyone unworthy who tried to wear it, literally cook their flesh from the inside out. And those famous stepsisters who cut off their toes and heels to fit the slipper, they weren't desperate. They were following tradition. They functioned as cautionary examples of transformation gone wrong. Beings who'd attempted the cannibalistic metamorphosis, but lacked the spiritual fortitude to complete it successfully. You see, social climbing always required blood sacrifice. The only question was how much you were willing to spill. But here's what really happened. When they failed the test, ravens would come. Speaking ravens, they'd peck out the eyes of anyone who tried to cheat the supernatural system. The ball wasn't about finding love. It was about proving you'd paid the price for transformation. And not everyone who entered that ballroom made it out alive. Speaking of transformation, have you ever wondered what you'd be willing to sacrifice to completely change your life? Let us know in the comments. And don't say nothing. We all have a price. Blood in the slipper. Although the glass slipper is the most famous part of the Cinderella story, but in the original versions, it wasn't glass at all. It was made from crystallized moonbeams, or ice that never melted, or in some versions, the bones of previous failed candidates. The slipper wasn't just to fit, it was to judge. It could see into your soul and decide if you'd earned the right to wear it. If you hadn't paid the proper price, it would reject you violently. It was about proving you'd successfully completed your transformation ritual. Only someone who had incorporated supernatural abilities through ancient practices could wear footwear made from otherworldly materials. It was a final exam, and failing meant more than embarrassment. It meant obliteration. Beauty as a weapon. 3 men saved the real Cinderella story, and each one revealed something different about how power actually works. Giambattista Basile wrote the first literary version in 1634 Naples. His Cinderella original story featured a girl named Zezolla, who straight up planned her stepmother's death, crushed her skull with a chest lid, cold blood. This was what happened. Her father remarries. Zezolla can't handle it. Her nurse suggests a solution. Kill your father's new wife, the nurse says. After planning and calculations, Zezolla spends weeks studying her stepmother's habits, learning her routine, waiting for the perfect moment. She plants valuable items in an attic chest, knowing her stepmother will investigate when no one's around. Then she positions herself just right. When the stepmother leans over to look inside, Zezolla drops the heavy lid, crushes her skull, makes it look like an accident. But here's where the dark side of Disney stories really shows. Zezolla even injures herself during the accident to make her story more believable. She's that good at deception. The aftermath, Zezolla publicly grieves, cries real tears. But those tears aren't just for show. They become the magical ingredient for what happens next. Because the nurse who helped plan the murder, she becomes the new stepmother. And she's even worse than the first one. She favors her own 6 daughters over Zezolla, reducing the girl who made her rise possible to a kitchen servant. This is the real lesson of the Italian version. Violence creates consequences you can't control. But then something supernatural happens. A date palm grows from the dead stepmother's grave, fed by Zezolla's tears. And it talks. This isn't your Disney fairy godmother. This is the spirit of the woman Zezolla murdered, transformed into something both helpful and terrifying. The tree gives Zezolla supernatural clothes, yes, but also teaches her skills that would take years to learn normally. Court protocol, classical literature, how to read people's faces and manipulate conversations, how to become a completely different person depending on who's watching. The symbolism in ancient folklore here is clear. Power comes from death. You destroy something to create something new. Basile understood something brutal. Transformation requires destroying what came before, even if it's someone you love. His message was clear. Social climbing demands violence. The question is whether you're willing to commit it. Jump forward to 1697 France. Charles Perrault took Basile's murderer and turned her into the passive Cinderella we know today. But don't be fooled. His version is more terrifying because it's subtle. Perrault wrote for the court of Louis XIV, the most dangerous place in Europe. One wrong word meant death. So he coded his real message about aristocracy and deception in myth. His Cinderella doesn't kill anyone. She doesn't need to. She weaponizes kindness instead. When she forgives her stepsisters at the end, that's not mercy. That's psychological warfare. She makes them dependent on her generosity for the rest of their lives. By helping her former tormentors, she established herself as their patron. This is revenge through overwhelming generosity. Perrault's glass slipper wasn't about finding true love. It was about proving you could perform aristocratic identity so perfectly that even supernatural forces believed it. The fairy godmother wasn't granting wishes. She was a political advisor, teaching survival skills for court life. She didn't just give Cinderella beauty, she gave her a complete aristocratic education in a single night. Languages, cultural knowledge, court etiquette, and most importantly, the ability to read people's weaknesses and use them. The French version taught readers how to climb the social ladder without getting their hands dirty. Pure manipulation disguised as virtue. This is where beauty became a weapon. Not just physical appearance, but the ability to make people want to please you, trust you, need you. The French Cinderella mastered psychological warfare disguised as charm. Then came the Brothers Grimm. In 19th century Germany, they collected the darkest version of all, Aschenputtel. Their stepsisters knew the rules. Social mobility required blood sacrifice. So they sliced off toes and heels to fit that supernatural shoe. The screaming echoed through the palace as their blood literally spoke, crying out their deception. But the Grimms added something Basile and Perrault didn't: divine justice. Ravens attacked the stepsisters' eyes during the wedding ceremony, pecked them out while the crowd cheered. The German version taught that supernatural forces actively punish those who try to cheat the transformation process. You pay the price properly, or cosmic justice destroys you. Each writer preserved different aspects of the forgotten history of Cinderella. Basile showed the violence required for change. Perrault revealed the psychology needed to survive power. The Grimms demonstrated the consequences of trying to fake your way to the top. But here's what connects all three. None of them believed in rescue. Their Cinderellas earned their transformations through intelligence, ruthlessness, and understanding that beauty as a weapon beats beauty as decoration every time. These weren't fairy tales that were never meant for kids. They were instruction manuals for adults living in societies where the wrong choice meant death. And we still live in that world. We just pretend the rules changed. Modern stories Disney doesn't want you to know would teach the same lessons. Want power? Here's what it costs. Want transformation? Here's the price. Want to transcend your circumstances? Stop waiting for rescue and start planning your strategy. The three writers who saved Cinderella's dark secrets understood something we've forgotten. Fairy tales weren't about happy endings. They were about survival, and survival always demands sacrifice. The only question is, what are you willing to sacrifice? We still wear the slippers. As I mentioned earlier, we never stopped telling the Cinderella story. We just moved it from the ballrooms to boardrooms. Every corporate makeover show, every glow-up transformation, every rags-to-riches story on social media, it's all modern Cinderella, and we're still paying the same prices our ancestors did. Think about it. How many people do you know who've transformed themselves for success? Changed their accent, their style, their entire personality to fit in somewhere better? How many have cut pieces of themselves off? Not literally like the stepsisters, but emotionally, spiritually, to fit into spaces that weren't made for them. The glass slipper today is the perfect LinkedIn profile, the flawless Instagram feed, the fake YouTube vlogs, the performance of having it all together while you're falling apart inside. That's the life you're trying to fit into. The question is, what are you willing to cut off to make it fit? And just like in the old stories, not everyone survives the transformation. Some people lose themselves completely, trying to become what they think others want them to be. The stepmother is your boss, who makes you work twice as hard for half the credit. The stepsisters are the colleagues who'll step on you to get ahead. The fairy godmother isn't a magical being anymore. She's the wellness industry, the self-help gurus, the transformation coaches, promising you can become anyone you want to be. For a price, of course. There's always a price. But here's what they don't tell you. The midnight deadline is real. The persona you build to succeed. It takes constant energy to maintain. And the bigger the transformation, the harder the fall when the mask slips. This is making you think about your own transformations, isn't it? Share in the comments. What version of yourself do you perform for success? And what did you have to sacrifice to become it? The price of dreams. So there you have it, the real Cinderella story you were never meant to hear. From cannibalistic rituals in prehistoric caves to psychological warfare in modern boardrooms, the story hasn't changed. It's always been about one thing. What are you willing to sacrifice to escape your circumstances? The dark side of Disney stories isn't just that they sanitize the violence, it's that they made us forget the lesson. Transformation isn't free, change isn't easy, and sometimes the price of becoming who you want to be is losing who you used to be. These stories Disney doesn't want you to know remind us that every culture, every generation faces the same choice. Stay in your assigned place, or transform yourself, knowing that transformation always comes with consequences you can't predict. The ancient versions knew this. They didn't promise happy endings. They promised that if you were clever, ruthless, and lucky enough to survive the process, you might just become something powerful enough to write your own story. If this tale of ritual transformation and hidden power disturbed you, then you're ready for the next forbidden story. Because Cinderella wasn't the only figure recast into something innocent. There's another character, far older and far more feared, whose legend was twisted beyond recognition. What if Lucifer, the ultimate villain in Western myth, wasn't the enemy at all? What if, like Cinderella, his story was rewritten by those in power to keep dangerous truths buried? If you're ready to question everything, the next chapter is waiting. Watch it next. Like this video and subscribe to our channel. Good night.